Thank you, Nicole. So my story goes back to 2017. And in 2017, my son, Dante, was incarcerated in a correctional facility in Buffalo, New York. I myself live in Long Island, so it's about 425 miles away. I received a phone call one morning from someone that was incarcerated with him, stating that my son had been severely beaten the night before by about 15 correction officers. He said that they went in and they started beating my son, and he could hear him being hit. And they hog-tied him and possibly threw him down the stairs. He didn't have any other information, but he was telling me, you have to call this facility now. He was really bad when they dragged him out. I called the facility. I got the runaround. I had to wait a few hours before someone finally called me back. And when I received that phone call, it was from a reverend, and he said, "Sit down." And I that day is burnt into my memory. But fast forward to 2 weeks later, I received my son's body. It was in the funeral home where I first saw him for the first time. And I was in total shock because my son did not look like himself at all. His face was still completely swollen. The funeral home employees said that they had to do a lot of work to make him look like they did. He had a lot of makeup on to try to hide the bruising. After getting through that, I then tried to find out more information about what was happening. But, when you're dealing with corrections and when you're dealing with police, you really do not get any information. It's nearly impossible to get that information. I then started sending FOIL requests to the state to try to get information. I eventually, years down the line, got pictures of my son, both before he died and after he died. The autopsy took about 4 months to receive. And in the autopsy, it stated that my son was severely beaten. He had blunt force trauma all over his entire body. Nurses' notes said that he was unable to eat solid food. He could barely see. In the picture where he was beaten when he was still alive, he can barely lift his head to see out of his eyes. And then, I waited for something to happen. I waited a very long time for something to happen. And administratively, it turns out that even though there was an investigation and the OSI, which is the Office of Special Investigation, determined that my son was in fact beaten by officers and that the officers falsified documents, those officers still never missed a day of work. They never missed a day of pay. They are still working to this day. Criminally, they haven't been charged criminally. And then the only thing that we have agency in is to bring a civil suit. So that's when I learned about qualified immunity. But before that, when trying to get an attorney, I spent years going to different attorneys being turned down because I didn't have enough information. These cases are extremely difficult to litigate in the first place. And apparently they know that qualified immunity will come up in these cases. So it wasn't until 2 years after this happened that I was finally able to basically hand an attorney all this information that I waited years to get through FOIL, to show them that this case was worthy of their time. I spent $20,000 of my own money to send private investigators to the facility to get the statements because, witnesses, their memories will fade. So I had to get those statements down immediately. I've talked to other mothers that have dealt with similar things to this, and they don't even know where to begin. You know, I filed that case in 2020. We have not even gotten to discovery yet. And already the officers have brought up qualified immunity as a defense to their actions. So that is how I found out what qualified immunity was. And that's why I realized that it is so detrimental to justice, to families, to communities, and it needs to end.